idea of missionary aviation grew out of the Second World War. A lot of the young men, especially in the Air Force, began to dream of how airplanes could be used to serve God.
Hiking, part of the time, the first trips were on foot and then by muleback.
And there was no aviation organization, but Cam already had this passion for it.
The one thing about Townsend was he believed that all technology, all the new things that were happening, like the airplane, he believed that God created the airplane just to finish the Great Commission. So we were doing stuff that had never been done before and trusting God in ways that, unless God showed up, it wasn't going to work.
And if you go back and look at the first recruitment qualifications, to try to get people to this organization, they stated that experience needed, operate this type of aircraft, remote places, all of that. They didn't have a problem finding people. Those were the guys that just went and made it happen. They just went and set it up. And you go from a concept in 46 when you don't even have an organization to building Urena Cocha 3 years later. That's amazing.
In the early days, when we went to Peru, there were no airstrips. The jungle, but there were rivers, but there were no roads anywhere. So we started with pontoon planes. After we started with float planes, we could reach the villages that were along the river. Some of the villages back in the forest further, we started building airstrips. Townsend was trying to build international goodwill. He took loving your neighbor very serious, and the airplane was there to serve the people.
1955, Cam is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he sees an interesting-looking plane with a tall shark fin-type tail and amazing takeoff and landing capability. He was a helio courier.
And when he saw that, he just dreamed that this is the ideal plane for missions. I think I picked up the 7th one ever built. And then I flew it on out to California, where Vice President Richard Nixon dedicated the plane.
And this airplane that is to be presented today is going to help tremendously. And those of you who have had a part in it, and to all of you who are here, we thank you.
The Philippines came on, New Guinea came on, Africa was talking about expanding, and so it made a lot of sense to have a base in the United States. Yeah, when I came here to JAARS, we didn't have a paved runway. So sometimes we'd have a whole week when, because of the rain off and on, the runways were just hardly usable. And one night, my son, I think, was 15 or 16 years old, and he had a good friend named Craig Miller. We were out for a walk one night on the runway, and I'm trying to teach him about faith. And I said to him, how would you guys like to join me in a prayer thing? We'll ask God to pave the runway. So we did. About a week later, they told me about a contractor in Monroe. They build roads. Mr. Shirley was the man. They said he's a Christian, and he might be interested in helping us. I told him about JAARS. I told him what we're trying to do, and I said, we got this runway, and it needs to be paved, and I don't know whether you could help us or not. He just kind of looked at me and he said, yeah. He says, I can do that. A couple of weeks later, some people came down, surveyors, and they came down and they started checking this whole place out. And the next thing happened, some bulldozers, and they began to work on the runway. After a while, gravel trucks came, put the trucks down. After a while, asphalt came, but after a while, we had a runway. I never really saw Mr. Shirley until it was all done. I went back to see him, because we never talked about money. We never talked about anything. I said, what do we owe you? Oh, no, he says, God told me to do this. I said, well, how did you do it? He said, well, we're the main contractor on this new highway they're building from Charlotte to Lancaster, called 521. And I think the gravel and the asphalt was kind of left over. And it was an answer to prayer. And it taught my children and me, we can just pray, trust God. When I went to Peru, east of the mountains, where there was 42 languages, None of them had an alphabet, no literature, no knowledge of Jesus, zero. Today, every one of those languages has scripture. Everyone has schools. The literacy rate is 80%. The life expectancy's gone from like the late 20s to the 60s. And that's all happened in my lifetime. And there is a church in every village. And that's what God can do. And that's what he's done. I had the privilege of having a very, very small part in a big, big plan.
Partner with JAARS to make disciples in the last unreached areas. Visit jaars.org/WIT 2023 for compelling videos, graphics, and ways to give.